Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University.
Hi, my name is Hayden. I'm a junior from Chandler, Arizona. My question is, what is the economic system in the U.S. and who influenced it?
Thank you so much for that question. And today I am really excited to have Dr. Trevor Shelley, who is an assistant professor and director of graduate studies at the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership, and somebody that I get to work with. So it is really great to have you on the podcast. Dr. Shelley, can you help us answer this question?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much. Very glad to be here. You know, many argue that the U.S. has a market economy or a system of free enterprise, or what is otherwise known as capitalism. As it were, this latter word was originally coined by Karl Marx, and so carries a degree of derogation, perhaps even still. And moreover, none of these terms were used by the founders themselves. Perhaps then none perfectly capture really the complex nature of the economic system of the United States. The phrase that the founders used was that of commercial republic, which consists of two terms around which there was and really continues to be considerable disagreement about their true meaning, as well as whether they can or really do hang well together. Now, that there might be some tensions here between the commercial or economic and the Republican or political aspects of the American regime or system is worth highlighting, even if we can't go into them in great detail. But to put it simply, commerce seems to recognize no limits, right? The whole world can be a market for individual and voluntary exchange. Well, on the other hand, a republic rests on specific limits and delineations, say, of territory, population, powers, and even values or a common good. One might engage in international trade, but one still remains, something of a citizen of a particular political community or regime. And to maybe put these tensions a little differently yet, commerce encourages the pursuit, if not the love, of wealth. Well, the spring of republics is really the practice, if not the love, of civic virtue. So with these tensions in mind, it's perhaps best to characterize the American economic system as something of a mixture or even a mixed economy. It consists largely of private property ownership, freedom of contract and association, market exchange and competition, and an extensive division of labor in production. There has been a persistent, if varying, degree of government regulation, protectionism, social welfare programs, and public services. This mixture of, on the one hand, market-driven systems, and on the other hand, of government intervention, I think reflects at least something of the original tensions of the early commercial republic. And that said, commerce itself, of course, has changed with scientific, technological, and industrial developments, which have had tremendous further effects on the republic, even perhaps on the very possibility of and for republicanism. As to the thinkers who influenced the American founders and thus the American economic system, there are many, but maybe to name just a few of the luminaries, certainly John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, David Hume, and Adam Smith. Those would be the first to come to mind. Among the founders themselves, Alexander Hamilton arguably had the greatest initial impact on the American economic system, but he was certainly not without opponents or dissenters. And some of the early debates and disagreement over the role of commerce and the meaning of republicanism, and thus whether and what shape the American commercial republic should or ought to take, can be found, for example, in the writings of the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, which I'd encourage all of the listeners to read and reread.
And we, after this podcast, will very much do a deep dive into some of those Federalist papers. Dr.
Awesome.
Shelley, can I ask you a little bit more about Adam Smith? Because, when I look at when I was a teacher and having to teach this, a big part of it was, we did talk about Locke and Montesquieu brought up Hume, but Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations, what kind of influence did that have on the economy, maybe that we have now?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that as we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, it also marks the 250th anniversary of Adam Smith's large economic work and an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. And in this book, Smith, a 2-volume work, a massive work, Smith both compiled and systematized most of the existing works and knowledge of political economy, but also critiqued much of what he saw as contrary to productivity and liberty, a system known as mercantilism. And in the work, he advances his own view that he referred to as the system of natural liberty. And to mention just a couple of key elements of this work, he certainly elaborated right from the outset in a rather magisterial way on the importance of the division of labor for the sake of productivity. He saw how the broader it extended through ever more specialization, the greater the proficiency and output would be, but also that as markets themselves extended, or there was access to greater extended markets, this would further encourage in turn more specialized labor and economic growth. So these things work together. And this insight regarding sort of productivity and the possibility for wealth for nations was, of course, very attractive to many of the founders, and again, not least of all, Alexander Hamilton. I should also add, of course, that Smith elaborated under the guise of his very famous phrase, used only 2 times, possibly 3 in a different context, but twice in his works, once in The Wealth of Nations and once in The Theory of Moral Sentiments, this famous phrase, the invisible hand. And for our purposes here in this work, The Wealth of Nations, this metaphor really suggests that markets, the mechanism of a market or the place and space of voluntary exchange, operates in an unintentional manner to direct self-interest toward the public interest or the benefit of others. And so again, it's in contrast to this notion of mercantilism, where the suggestion was that wise statesmen ought to be directing the actions and the productivity and the labor of various members of the community and parts of the nation. Here, the idea is when in fact individuals step back or governments minimize this kind of top-down orchestration and control, the outputs will be all the greater. And so there's an argument here as well, of course, that really dovetails with limited government or constitutionalism as the founders understood it as well.
Dr. Shelley, that was the most efficient explanation of our economy and Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and we definitely hope to have you on again.
All right.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.